My sister Renee had a key to my apartment for emergencies. I want to be precise about that, because the word emergency is doing a lot of work in this story. And I think it's important to establish early on what it was supposed to mean versus what it came to mean in practice. Emergencies, in the context I'd intended when I pressed that spare key into her hand 4 years ago, meant things like, I've locked myself out, or there's a package I need you to grab, or God forbid, something has happened and someone needs to get inside. Standard stuff. The kind of arrangement that exists between reasonable adults who trust each other with access to their space. What it came to mean over the following 4 years was, Renee let herself in on a Tuesday afternoon while I was on a work call to take 3 pounds of imported prosciutto, 2 containers of the expensive Greek yogurt I ordered specifically because my nutritionist recommended it, a bottle of olive oil I'd brought back from a trip to Florence, and the last of a bag of specialty coffee I'd been rationing since January. I found out she'd been by when I went to make dinner, and the refrigerator had a specific, hollowed-out quality I'd learned to recognize the way you recognize a familiar smell. Not empty exactly, just meaningfully less than I'd left it. It had been going on, in some form or another, for the better part of 2 years. At first it was small things. A loaf of bread here, some leftovers there, the kind of taking that felt almost within the reasonable bounds of sisterly familiarity, the kind I told myself I was being uptight about when a small, persistent voice suggested I should say something. Then it escalated, the way things always escalate when the initial boundary isn't named. The bread became weekly grocery runs. The occasional leftover became organized haul-outs. Renee arriving with her own reusable bags, which struck me every single time as a level of premeditation that should have short-circuited the "she doesn't realize how much she's taking" excuse I'd been running on for longer than I care to admit. She had a system. That's the part I couldn't stop thinking about even then, before I understood the full scope of it. She had a genuine functional system. She knew which days I went grocery shopping, knew approximately what I'd have restocked. She'd come by 2 or 3 days after a big shop, when the fridge was full and I might not notice the gaps immediately, fill her bags in a way that suggested some internal inventory management, and leave with enough to cover several days of her household's meal. Her household being? Herself, her husband Craig, and their 3 kids who were 7, 9, and 11, and who Renee had, somewhere along the way, decided were my financial responsibility by virtue of existing and being related to me. I am a senior financial auditor. I work 60-plus-hour weeks. I live alone in an apartment I pay for entirely myself, in a city where groceries are not cheap, and I shop the way I do everything professionally, carefully, specifically, with a list and a budget and a preference for quality that I have earned the right to afford without feeling guilty about it. I was not, in any objective sense, underutilizing my kitchen. I was not sitting on a surplus that required redistribution. I simply had food in my refrigerator that I'd purchased with my own money, and my sister had decided that what was mine was, by some logic I never agreed to and was never consulted about, also hers. I said something about it once. One time in 2 years, which I think tells you something about how thoroughly she'd trained me to expect the reaction I got. It was a Sunday afternoon. She'd come by, let herself in, was already in the kitchen when I came out of my home office, and was in the process of packing what I could see was a full week's worth of the groceries I'd had delivered that morning, still in their bags on the counter, some of them not yet unpacked. "Renee," I said, keeping my voice easy, conversational, the tone I use with difficult clients when I need to redirect without triggering a defensive shutdown. "I actually need most of that this week. I'm working late every night and I was planning to cook." She stopped, turned around, looked at me with an expression I'd only previously seen on the faces of people who have been told something so bewildering they need a moment to locate the appropriate outrage. "Are you serious right now?" she said, not a question. I ordered that this morning and I have 3 kids, Mara." Her voice had gone flat and sharp, the particular register she'd perfected over years of weaponizing the children she'd chosen to have. 3 kids. Do you understand what it costs to feed 3 kids? And you're sitting here alone in your big apartment, making your big salary, and you're going to stand there and tell me you can't spare some groceries for your own nieces and nephews. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I bought this for myself this week. Are you really too cheap to feed your own family? She said it with a particular emphasis on cheap, the word landing the way she'd intended it to, barbed and small-making, pulling at some old, deep instinct that said being called cheap meant something was wrong with you. I didn't realize my sister was the kind of person who hoards food while her sister's family struggles. "You're not struggling," I said. "Craig has a job, you have a—" "I cannot believe this." She dropped the bag she was holding, straightened up, and looked at me with the theatrical devastation of a woman who has just witnessed a profound moral failure. "I genuinely cannot believe you're making me feel like a criminal for trying to feed my children. This is a new low, Mara. I hope you know that." She left. Without the groceries, that one time which I told myself meant something, it meant nothing. She was back 3 days later on a Wednesday while I was at the office, and when I came home, the fridge had that particular hollowed-out quality again. I stood in front of my open refrigerator for a long time that evening. Long enough for the cold air to start spreading into the kitchen. Long enough to do the math I'd been avoiding for 2 years on what it actually cost, in dollars and cents, per week, per month, per year, to run an unauthorized free supermarket out of my own home for a family of 5 who were, as I knew for a documented fact from a conversation with Craig 6 months prior, not struggling. They'd been to Cancun that spring. I'd seen the photos. I closed the refrigerator. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop, then my bank's transaction history, then my grocery delivery app with its full, searchable order history going back 26 months. And I opened a new spreadsheet. And I started typing. I am, professionally speaking, very good at this. That sounds like a brag, and I suppose it is. But I want to be precise about what this means because it matters to the story. I am good at taking a large, complicated, emotionally loaded financial situation and reducing it to its component parts, its line items, its dates and figures and totals, until what was once a swamp of feelings becomes a clean, legible document that says exactly one thing. Here is what happened. Here is what it cost. Here is what is owed. I spent the better part of 3 evenings on the spreadsheet. Not because it was mathematically complicated, it wasn't, but because I was thorough. Because I have never in my professional life submitted a document with an error I could have caught, and I wasn't about to start now. The grocery delivery app was the backbone of it. 26 months of itemized orders, every delivery timestamped and cataloged. And because I am the kind of person who keeps detailed notes, I had a reasonably accurate record of what the refrigerator had looked like before and after Renee's visits, cross-referenced against the delivery dates. The pattern was consistent enough that I could map it without much guesswork. She came within 2 to 4 days of a major shop reliably, and the things that disappeared were consistently the higher value items, the proteins, the specialty ingredients, the things that cost real money at a good grocery store and cost significantly more when ordered fresh and delivered. I worked category by category the way I work any audit. Methodically, without editorializing, letting the numbers say what they were going to say without my feelings in the way. Proteins first. 2 years of imported prosciutto, grass-fed beef, wild-caught salmon, organic chicken thighs, specialty cheeses, the kind of charcuterie I bought for myself because I worked hard and I enjoyed good food and I was allowed to. All of it reconstructed from delivery records and departure notes and the specific learnable pattern of what went missing when. I was conservative in my estimates. Where I wasn't certain of a quantity, I took the lower figure. I didn't want drama. I wanted accuracy. Then produce, specialty and organic, the heirloom tomatoes, the good mushrooms, the prepared salad kits I bought for fast dinners after long days, the fresh herbs I kept in a small clay pot on the windowsill and restocked more often than I'd ever stopped to calculate. Then pantry staples, olive oils, vinegars, the good pasta, imported jarred sauces, and beverages, the specialty coffee, the sparkling water I preferred. A case of wine I'd been working through that had gone faster than it should have, which I hadn't connected to Renee until I reconstructed the timeline and saw that the depletion rate tracked exactly with her visit frequency. Household items, paper towels, dish soap, the expensive hand lotion I kept by the kitchen sink that vanished so regularly I'd started buying it in multi-packs. Baking supplies, this one surprised me, the scale of it, until I remembered Craig mentioning once, offhandedly, that Renee had been doing some baking for friends. And something clicked quietly into place that I filed away and didn't look at too closely until the spreadsheet showed me the numbers. The total, when I summed the final column on the 3rd evening, was $14,920. I looked at it for a long time, not with surprise exactly. By the time I reached the last row, I'd been watching the figure climb with the steady, inevitable quality of a tide coming in, and the final number felt less like a revelation than a confirmation of something I'd already understood in some quiet, furious part of myself. What I felt looking at that number was closer to a specific professional satisfaction. The kind that comes at the end of a long audit when the discrepancy you suspected turns out to be exactly as large as the evidence suggested, not $1 more, not $1 less, just the truth, clean and complete and formatted into a column total. I formatted the spreadsheet into a proper corporate invoice. I used the same template I use for billing client accounts at work, adjusted the header to read Mara Selby, personal accounts receivable across the top, listed my address, Renee's address, and the invoice date, and itemized every category with its 2-year subtotal in a clean, readable font that I chose carefully because I am that kind of person. At the bottom, in the total field, in the font size I reserve for figures that need to be understood immediately and without ambiguity, 14,920 *. Payment terms upon receipt. I printed it on the good paper, the heavyweight stock I keep in my desk for documents that are meant to be taken seriously. Then I drove to the framing shop on Callaway Street that I'd walked past 100 times without a reason to go in, and I asked the man behind the counter for their best black frame, the kind with a glass front and a clean matte border, the kind that looks authoritative on a wall. He asked me what I was framing. An accounts receivable document, I said. He didn't ask any follow-up questions. He cut the mat to size, fitted the invoice behind the glass, snapped the frame together, and handed it across the counter with the same professional care he'd have given a wedding portrait. It cost me $42. I did not add it to the invoice, though I thought about it. I drove home, wrapped the frame in brown paper the way you wrap a gift you want someone to have to work a little to open, set it on my passenger seat, and spent the evening doing nothing in particular. Reading, eating dinner at my own table with food nobody had come by to redistribute, going to bed at a reasonable hour. In the morning, I made coffee slowly from the good beans I'd restocked specifically, because the previous bag had gone missing at a rate inconsistent with one person's consumption. I drank it at the kitchen counter with the wrapped frame propped against the wall where I could see it. Then I picked it up, put it under my arm, and went to my car. Renee lived 14 minutes away, a drive I'd made so many times in both directions that it had stopped registering as distance. I drove it the way I drove everything lately, without anxiety, without the low-grade dread that used to accompany any interaction with my sister that might require me to hold a boundary. I'd done the work. The document was done. The math was correct. Whatever happened next, I had the receipts. Literally. I parked at the curb in front of her house, cut the engine, and sat for a moment in the quiet of the car, the brown paper-wrapped frame across my lap. Through the living room window I could see the blue flicker of a television, which meant someone was home, which was fine. I needed someone to be home. I got out of the car. Renee answered the door in a sweatshirt and leggings, a coffee mug in one hand, the specific unhurried expression of a woman who hadn't been expecting anyone and wasn't yet sure whether to be annoyed about it. Mara, not a greeting exactly, more an acknowledgement. Her eyes dropped to the brown paper package under my arm. "What's that?" "A housewarming gift," I said, late. She opened the door wider because that's what you do when your sister shows up with a wrapped package. And I stepped into the living room, which I had been inside approximately 80 times in the past 2 years, always dropping things off, never arriving to collect anything in return. Craig was on the couch with a laptop. He looked up, nodded, looked back down. The 3 kids were somewhere upstairs, audible as a distant, intermittent thumping from above. I set the package down on the coffee table. I unwrapped it without ceremony, peeling the brown paper back in clean folds, the way you open something you packed yourself and know the contents of entirely. The frame emerged corner by corner, black and clean and professional, the glass front catching the living room light. Renee leaned forward slightly to read it. I watched her face move through several expressions in quick succession. Confusion first, then a dawning, incredulous recognition, then something that crossed rapidly between outrage and a paler, more complicated emotion I recognized from years of delivering audit findings to people who had hoped, right up until the moment of delivery, that the numbers might say something different than they did. "What is this?" she said, flat, careful. It's an invoice, I said. Accounts receivable. 2 years, itemized by category, conservative estimates throughout. I can walk you through the methodology if you'd like, but the math is straightforward. Craig had looked up from his laptop again. He was reading the frame now from across the room, his expression doing something similar to Renee's, but arriving at the paler emotion faster. The one that looked like a man quietly calculating how much trouble he was about to be in for something he'd been comfortably ignoring. "You're insane," Renee said. Her voice had found its footing now, climbing toward the register she'd used on the Sunday with the grocery bags, the one designed to make me feel small and unreasonable. "You actually sat down and made a 'this is insane,' Mara. You're going to invoice your own sister for food. For 26 months of groceries," I said. "Yes. That's not, you can't just," she stopped. Picked up the frame, which I thought was a mistake on her part because holding the thing made it more real, not less. Her eyes moved down the itemized columns, and I watched them stop and start the way eyes do when the numbers are larger than the brain wants to process quickly. $14,920, I said. I rounded down in every category where I wasn't certain of the exact quantity. The actual figure is likely higher. "This is a joke. The payment terms are listed at the bottom," I said, "upon receipt." She set the frame back down on the coffee table with more force than necessary, which I noted without reacting to. Because I had, in the 3 evenings I'd spent building the spreadsheet, processed most of the feelings I was going to have about this situation. And what remained was something much quieter and more functional than feeling. "You cannot be serious." Her voice was climbing now, the full register opening up, and from upstairs I heard the thumping slow slightly, the specific attentiveness of children who have learned to monitor the temperature of adult conversation. "After everything I've done for this family, after all the times I've been there for you, I need you to be specific about those times," I said, not unkindly. "Because I've been fairly specific." I nodded toward the frame. Craig closed his laptop. He was looking at the invoice now with the expression of a man doing arithmetic he didn't like the outcome of, and I recognized the specific quality of his silence as the silence of someone who knows, and has always known, that a thing was happening and simply preferred not to look at it directly. "Mara," he said my name carefully, the way you say the name of someone holding something fragile. "Look, maybe we got a bit comfortable with the arrangement." "The arrangement," I said, "was that I gave Renee a key for emergencies. That's the only arrangement I agreed to." I picked up the frame from the coffee table. I walked to the center of the living room wall, the wide one above the console table, the one directly facing the couch, the one that was visible from every seat in the room. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the small hammer and a single nail I'd dropped in there before I left my apartment, the way you bring everything you need to a job site rather than improvising on arrival. "What are you doing?" Renee said. I tapped the nail into the drywall, one clean strike, then a second to set it properly. The sound was sharp and final in the quiet of the living room. I hung the frame. I stepped back, checked that it was level, adjusted it a 1/4 inch to the left and looked at it on the wall. The black frame sat cleanly against the off-white paint, the invoice behind its glass front readable from across the room if you had decent eyesight, which Renee did. $14,920. Clean font. Professional margins. My name at the top as the creditor, her address below as the debtor. Every column of every category of every item she had systematically removed from my home over 2 years, laid out with the same care I brought to every audit I'd ever produced in my professional life. I thought it looked quite good on the wall, actually. "Consider this your copy," I said. "I have the original on file." Renee was staring at the frame with an expression I didn't have a precise name for, somewhere between fury and the specific, sickening recognition of a person seeing themselves clearly for the first time in a long time, and finding the image harder to dismiss than they'd expected. Craig said nothing. He was looking at the invoice with the careful eyes of a man reading a document he wished he'd had the foresight to prevent. "The spare key," I said, turning toward Renee, "no longer works. I updated the lock remotely this morning." I pulled the spare from my jacket pocket, the one I had cut 4 years ago with entirely different intentions, and set it on the console table below the frame. "You're welcome to keep it as a souvenir." I picked up my hammer, I put it back in my pocket. The free supermarket is closed, I said. Permanently. Grand closing sale was everything in my fridge for the last 2 years. I looked at the frame one last time, satisfied in the clean, complete way of someone who has finished a piece of work exactly the way they intended to. I'll see myself out. I walked past Renee, who hadn't moved, past Craig, who had opened his laptop again and then immediately closed it again in the manner of a man who couldn't remember why he'd opened it, through the front door and down the 3 porch steps to the sidewalk, the afternoon sun hitting me full in the face in a way that felt, in that particular moment, almost congratulatory. I drove home, I ate lunch. I went to the grocery store in the late afternoon, the good one, the one with the imported section and the specialty cheese counter and the olive oils arranged by region of origin, and I filled my cart with exactly what I wanted, knowing, with a certainty I hadn't had in 2 years, that it would all still be there when I opened the refrigerator tomorrow. I heard from Renee, eventually, through our mother, who relayed the message with the diplomatic compression of a woman who had learned, over decades of mediating between her daughters, to strip a complaint down to its essential information without editorializing. The message was that the invoice was completely humiliating and not something a normal person does. I thought about that for a moment, standing in my kitchen with a glass of wine from a bottle nobody had touched without my knowledge. Tell her I'll take it down, I said, when the balance is settled. The invoice is still on the wall, as far as I know. My refrigerator, for the first time in 2 years, stays exactly the way I